Good morning and welcome to this morning's webinar on the skills and workforce actions of the Construction Recovery Plan. This webinar this morning is hosted by Construction Scotland Innovation Centre on behalf of the Construction Leadership Forum, and I'm your host today, Douglas Morrison, Director of Operations and Future Skills at Construction Scotland Innovation Centre. So the focus of today is very much to share outputs of 3 reports commissioned in support of the Construction Leadership Forum's Construction Recovery Plan. So we'll hear about skills, supply and demand in construction industry in Scotland. We'll hear about competency management and the technologies that can support us to manage competence effectively. And we'll hear about the skills ecosystem within Scotland. We will hear directly from the authors of each report. We're getting a sneak preview of author number 2, so good morning, Debbie. You will have the opportunity to reflect on findings, recommendations and conclusions that are presented within these reports, and also participate in an audience Q&A towards the webinar with each of the authors. I will introduce each speaker at the beginning of their contribution. So before we get started proper, I'd just like to run through some housekeeping and running order information. This session is being recorded. It will be available to view on the Construction Scotland Innovation Centre YouTube channel early next week. If you would like to ask a question or leave a comment, click on the questions in the control panel, type in your question and press send. Questions will be picked up by our support team and will be directed towards appropriate contributors on the webinar today. As always, your feedback is extremely valuable, so we'll take all questions or comments on board, even if we don't have time to answer them all. And lastly, just a thank you to all of you who've signed up to today's webinar, and I hope you find the next 55 minutes or so to be a valuable insight into the skills landscape. So without further ado, I'd like to begin by introducing Lisa Dean, who hopefully should be coming on your screen any moment now. Lisa leads Construction Scotland Innovation Centre's Skills and Training Programme with a particular focus on supporting BIM implementation, digitisation of the industry and learning opportunities around modern methods of construction, including off-site manufacture and design for manufacture and assembly. So Lisa is going to share some insights into skills supply and demand in Scotland. Over to you, Lisa.
Thank you. Good morning and welcome everyone for coming. Let me start just by sharing my screen. And we seem to be on my last slide for some reason, so let's start at the beginning. Thanks, Douglas. So I'd like to start today by talking about the skills and workforce actions. In 2020, there were approximately 238,000 people working in Scotland's built environment. And every year we expect to see 10% of these workers leave. That can be due to retirement, migration, career changes and other personal circumstances. To replace them, we need to look towards school leavers, graduates, people returning to the sector after a break, and those changing their career and entering the sector from a different area. One thing that all these people have in common though, is they require access to new skills or upskilling or perhaps even reskilling opportunities. The Scottish Government has recognised these challenges, and in collaboration with the Construction Leadership Forum, they've developed a Construction Recovery Plan. This will help to support the industry grow and flourish both now and in the years following the pandemic. Construction Scotland Innovation Centre have been tasked with supporting the industry in response to some of the 83 actions set out in this recovery plan. Today, we'll explore some of these actions that directly relate to the skills and workforce landscape. There are still a number of projects underway, including the exploration into the value of a National Skills Academy and the impact that this could have in the sector. However, in the first instance, I think it's imperative that we understand the current skills landscape and the supply and demand of skills in Scotland's tertiary education system. The research contained in the first of the 3 reports that we're publishing today focuses upon this exact issue, and it documents the ongoing challenges facing the sector, including an ageing workforce and distinct lack of diversity. This relates not just to gender diversification, but all underrepresented groups. Construction has in the past been heavily reliant upon migrant workers, but with many people choosing to return to their home countries in the last 15 months, the skills gap continues to widen, and the attractiveness of the industry remains low among local workers. And just as the supply of labour contracts, we're witnessing an increase in innovation and new technological advances, all of which require a different set of skills that are not readily available. Both the UK and Scottish Government have responded to these challenges by implementing a number of measures to mitigate its impact. These include the Apprenticeship Employer Grant, the Adopt an Apprentice Scheme, the Young Persons Guarantee, and a National Transition Training Programme, to name but a few. In terms of occupational groups, a number have been identified as requiring a high level of additional workers over the next 5 years. Plasterers, glaziers, surveyors will all be in high demand, but there's a recognised need to address the shortages in steel erectors, civil engineers and architects as well. Within this report, we have made a series of recommendations, each of which could help to address these challenges, including looking at new and improved ways to track a learner destination. This would help to understand why students who choose to study for a career in the built environment fall away after graduating from their course or their programmes. In addition, by increasing collaboration between public sector agencies, education providers and industry, we drive positive results through the matching of investment to areas most in need. Often we hear employers reference a lack of on-the-job experience that students have. If we can increase a learner's exposure to real-life projects and work-based learning, we're increasing their chances of employment and giving greater insights into real-world activity. CSIC currently run a Masters Innovation programme. This sees postgraduate level students studying for a career in construction matched up with employers to deliver research on real-life projects. Over the years, both students and employers have recognised the benefits this can bring. For a company looking to recruit, it enables them to confidently employ graduates who have the relevant expertise and hands-on experience of live projects. It makes a graduate CV much more attractive. For me, a key way to improve opportunities is to encourage wider adoption of formal recruitment practices, as this will widen the talent pool to give underrepresented marginalised groups more opportunity and employers a wider talent pool to choose from. If we can improve the visibility of skills supply and demand and the mismatches, we enable more effective planning to prevent further future skills shortages from the sector. Finally, can I encourage you to read the full report, which will be available after this webinar. Within it, we explore all the current challenges facing the sector in Scotland and consider how the skills pipeline can play a significant role in addressing them. It identifies the key drivers that are transforming the industry both at a national and global scale, and it considers how this will influence training provision going forward. In addition, it looks at the current public sector investment in tertiary education programmes, and it considers whether they meet the requirements of the current demand and future demand. Thank you for listening, and I'll hand back to Douglas now.
Okay, thank you, Lisa, and we will hear more from Lisa towards the end of the session. I do want to note that the report that Lisa is referring to, as well as all other reports covered in this webinar, are available in the handout section of your control panel and will be emailed to you after the webinar. I'm now going to invite in Debbie Carlton and Dr. Gang Zhu. A few words of note. They are going to present an evidence base for investment in workforce planning technology and competency management. I'll start with Debbie. Debbie is the Director of Dynamic Knowledge, and she's focused on working with organisations who want intelligent and sustainable solutions to solving capability, capacity and competence challenges that arise from the changing world of work, increased automation, AI and digital transformation. Debbie is a recognised specialist in competency management, analytics and assurance with published research and experience of designing and delivering dynamic competency-based infrastructure and services in partnership with a much awarded competency analysis and technology partner. So I will bring Dr. Gang Zhu in after Debbie's contribution, but Debbie, it is over to you.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Good morning, everybody. I'm just going to see if I can can anyone see my screen yet? No, just going to share my screen. Sorry, I'm not, oops.
You can see your screen, Debbie, if you could just put the PowerPoint below.
Yes, I just want to larger it. Wait, just give a second. I can't seem to get to it. Apologies for this. Oh dear. I can't seem to move the button so I can actually, apologies for this.
Would you like me to share your slides for you?
Yeah, wait a minute. There you are. I've done it. There you are. That's
Great.
better. Okay, can everyone see that? Well, thanks very much, Douglas, for your kind introduction. I apologize everyone for the slight delay, but my machine decided to restart itself just before the session. Today, my colleague Dr. Gang Zhao and I are delighted to present the findings of our report, which is in support of using technology to its full potential within workforce planning, with a focus on both competency, demand and supply of skills. It's a two-part report and two-part presentation. I'll be doing the first part and then handing over to Gang. And this report is set very much within the context of the very dynamic and digital agenda in the Scottish economy. So, that's trying to ensure that both, people and employers can flourish in the system as we go forward and deal with all the multiple agendas, from retrofit to digitalization to net zero, etc., of which there are many agendas on the table for everyone at the moment. The report provides a vision for a digital utility for competency management, a bit like if we think about a sort of water utility. If competency can flow and it's liquid, then we might improve the system and particularly address the mismatches. And Dr. Gang Zhao will be presenting that in the next part in terms of how that links to mediating competency supply and demand, and what that means in terms of employers from a workforce planning point of view and a career management point of view from individuals. I'm also a member of the Scottish Future Skills Group, like Douglas, and obviously this particular recovery plan action has overlap to other actions and overlaps, and if people are interested in that, please contact us and we can give more of that. Obviously today I can only touch on certain things, but within the report themselves, particularly in the appendices, there are some very sort of detailed analysis of our findings of analysing the Scottish skills system, looking at what workforce planning is, looking at what skills is versus competence is, looking at how people are trying to deal with some of the talent challenges in the current environment in terms of we work with. So just moving on to the next slide, and I just hope that has appeared. This is a sort of summary of our findings of the skills system, and really it's looking at the as is versus the to be. If we take the first point, at the moment we live in a world where really from a competency perspective, we're using a set of proxies. We use skill as a proxy for competence. We use qualifications or cards as a proxy for skills supply. We use occupations or roles for a proxy for demand. We really need to move to a situation where competency is a digital currency. It's liquid, it can flow, it's much more multidimensional, multifaceted, granular. The OECD has said that really staying in the view of these proxies is neither dynamic or granular enough for the world of work. There's also many use of words, skills systems, skill and learning systems, etc. But actually we've seen much more commonality around the concept of a skills ecosystem. And a lot of the current policy is focused much more around sort of 2012 research by Warhurst and Anderson in terms of skills, demand, supply, development and deployment, where supply is really about being met through more qualifications, much more of a sort of training education lens than a particular workplace lens, and more about demand, really about meeting employers' labour force training requirements. That a lot of research has moved on from that. It's matured, and my colleague Dr. Gang Zhao is the founder of a concept of a ecosystem approach to mediating competency, supply and demand, where there are 9 primary stakeholders, 144 interrelationships between demand and supply. So this gives a sort of message that it's more complex. There's many-to-many demand-supply relationships. You can be a demander and a supplier. So part of the report is recommending more of a vision along these lines. Linked to that, obviously, there's been a shift from a supply side view of the world to much more of a demand-led system, which is focused on industry and employee needs. But obviously, employers in the sector, a lot of them are SMEs, and in certain ways, employers are much more interested in being consumers of the right competence and have not been so necessarily so proactive in upskilling and supporting their workforce career development needs. So we need to move to something that is much more sort of people-centric as a counterbalance. We obviously live in an analog world at the moment around this. We need to move to a digital world. It's very fragmented, the skills system. We need much more of a systems view. The emphasis is usually on stocks of skills. We need to think about the stocks, flows, and the utilization, which is very important. And there's a lot of underutilization in the sector. There's overemphasis on skills shortages when actually it's more complex mixture of gaps, shortages, and mismatches. A lot of the supply side interventions are very much focused on 24-year-olds and under. There's a huge need for more what I call qualified to certified pathways, particularly post-Hackett, and much better mid-career pathways and opportunities, and really accelerating the time to sort of competency for people in those mid-careers. Upskilling, in a sense, is still very much set in a sort of lens of learning new skills or teaching the workforce new things, often very event-based. We need to move to something that's much more about what we call conscious competency evolution, something that's dynamic and continuous. We need, at the moment, very much, there's a sort of separation between sort of competency and compliance activities and organizations from a quality control and management perspective, but post-Hackett, we're really now in the world for competency to comply. We live in a world where competence frameworks at the moment are static, narrative, PDF type documents designed for humans, where we need them to be for machines and humans. And getting that presentation. Strategic workforce planning is really an art at present. We need to move to something that's much more evidence and value based. A lot of the emphasis on sort of managing the workforce, where we need to be really focused on really leading the workforce. So just moving forward in terms of thinking about what is workforce planning and what's the potential for technology to improve it, and to also address the complexity of the world we live in and the big digitalization agenda. Strategic workforce planning helps employers translate their goals into sort of human resource strategies right across the talent life cycle, from sort of acquiring people to moving people on, as it were. And it's typically in the domain of HR, and in that increasingly is EHR. There are three key elements to consider when looking at strategic workforce planning: the future, the risk, and sort of alignment. In terms of future, we're living in a very fast-paced world, and it's challenging to unlock the potential of people as a strategic asset. We need to consider both work and how new ways of work are done. We need to consider the needs of the workforce, who often now want more flexibility, more choice, career portfolios, etc. And we've got to think about the workplace, which has more hybrid models, and certainly post-COVID has changed enormously. Workforce and workforce planning will become much more task than role-based as professional work is systemized, standardized, productized, etc. And this is all happening. All of this sort of brings together challenges in terms of understanding risk and balancing what we call the sort of 3 C's. How can organizations balance the capability, competence, and capacity needs, so they've got the right people doing the right work with the right information, with the right competences at the right time, and for the right value, and obviously with the right values. We need much more of a sort of values-based approach to doing this, and we need new digital ways of working will impact how work is done and what other capabilities are needed, and that will have an implication for capacity as well. And with that, we need new mindsets, and we also need new methods, and we need to increase confidence in the system in terms of organizational to individual competency, and the implications for that in terms of value management and quality management. So I'm just going to let this just play this out rather than do that. So the next thing we're going to do is really look at strategic workforce planning through the lens of a competency management ecosystem, where there is enormous opportunity for digitalization using AI. So from a workforce planning's perspective, the whole point of if we had a really functioning competency management ecosystem, it would help employers take stock of competency supplies and flows. It would help the employers foresee the competency demands, and it will help them monitor those supply and demands as work changes, as project evolves, and obviously that's all been impacted by new technologies, new products, new ways of doing work within the sector. And this needs much more of a systemic approach to manage the enterprise or value chain, to lead the work and to deliver the value. So in summary, we need the right competence to do the work that will lead us all the way to achieving our goals. And you know, the recent evidence-based and research around strategic workforce planning is very much of an evidence-based, competence-based, value-based approach. In the current in the sector at the moment, workforce planning is very, very immature. It's rarely strategic. It's usually about, oh, we need these people, end roles to do tomorrow, today, where, when, or who's the person who's free now to do the work. So this is an area that we need to mature, and within it offers a great opportunity to leverage better mediation of competency supply and demand to support it, and to also leverage you know, the opportunities with digitalization. So my final slide is really what were the recommendations in our report. And I'm not going to read all of this out, obviously, but just to capture the headlines. We do need to redefine and position a broader view of a competency management ecosystem. We need modern definitions of competence that also recognize where knowledge and data of competence and compliance are also needed for machines as well as humans. We need much more research into new work and workforce planning methodologies, particularly from a perspective of competency, supply and demand, and how that can support employers in their workforce planning, but also competency in the supply chain. The need to redefine upskilling so that it can support competency in evolution and really empower individuals. The HR community in the sector is really unsupported. There isn't actually a sort of a LinkedIn or any kind of community for HR at the moment, and they have enormous challenges around how they digitize their own HR operations, as well as coping with new requirements around work, how work is done, what competences are needed. The next tsunami is going to be the digitalization of knowledge, not just the focus on data as we have in the sector. And we need to consider, the report suggests, considering a competency knowledge utility that could provide enormous transformation across the Scottish skills system. But this needs further research, particularly from the societal, economic, digital and exclusivity and people perspectives. And there's also a question of how much it should be in the commons. You know, this is a common utility that can allow many in the sector who are trying to address skills and competency challenges to leverage that and to share it and go further. So without further ado, I would just like to hand over to my colleague, Dr. Gang Zhao, and we look forward to your questions and taking this work forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Debbie, and more from Debbie later at the Q&A, so please do submit any questions or comments that you'd be keen for Debbie to consider. We're just going to bring in Dr. Gang Zhao. Gang should be appearing on your screen momentarily. He's a PhD in Artificial Intelligence from the University of Manchester. It's been in research, design and development of intelligence systems and applications in both academic and industrial contexts in the UK, EU and USA since the late 1990s. Gang has been architecting and developing AI technologies, natural language understanding, machine learning dialogue systems, machine translation, knowledge-based reasoning, data and knowledge mining, algorithm trading systems, talent management systems. I feel I should have a PhD for reading that out. Gang consults on technologies for competency analytics, management, knowledge systems for digital compliance, language processing, multimedia, information management. Gang, over to you.
Gang, you're just still on mute. If you could just unmute your mic before we begin.
Sorry about that. Sorry about that. Thank you. My part of study, I will drill down into into two aspects. Is basically, we're going to look at skill management in digital transformation. The purpose of looking at it is actually try to figure out what can be a good technology and digital agenda for the skill management. So the research result, we found that actually it is competency, knowledge, utility. So the first observation I would like to make is to say skill management is a sector of knowledge economy. So it is about the knowledge discovery, representation, dissemination, and mostly important is application. It involves multiple disciplines and occupations and economic activities. It has its own methodology that we must recognize and faces digital transformation challenges like any other business sectors. So when we are talking about digital transformation, there are many meanings depending on the context of its reference. And here we would like to describe digital transformation in terms of three objects: data, information, and knowledge. We can identify these three objects of digitalization, and we can also see that these three objects represent three corresponding stages of evolution, of business evolution in 30 years, either in the past or in the future. We can basically plot our past. We can basically plot our past and future projects on this map and see our business transformation along three dimensions: assets, processes, and human capital. We shall focus on assets and processes, but human capital itself is a big topic. You know, it's we'll scope it out. So digital transformation, what it really means is actually a paradigm shift from information to knowledge, from machine-assisted human systems to human-assisted machine system. So it's basically, it is this aspect that is causing a big disruption to our past tradition. Basically, humans is either playing the role of assisting the machines or making critical decisions within the machine processes. So what is the challenge? What is the challenge to our sector in this skill management? We can basically, I'm giving you a model of this domain, you know, skill management here. And it's a model of a hexagon and the circles. Basically, what we see is actually this yellow line of a hexagon is actually the domain. And we see those circles are actors. And in the middle is the facilitator. So this is a stakeholder view of this domain. So if we really look at the challenges for the skill management, for the actors, for the circles, then basically we can summarize in four questions. It's basically resources. There's lack of resources, funding and time that for the actors to embrace, you know, the AI and digital transformation. And second is capacity, is basically the skill sets, teams. The third is actually motivation. It's very much because they are highly specialized in their business focuses, and they probably would not be, you know, divert to others. So that is the lack of some kind of motivation in order to embrace this skill upgrading, skill management of the team. The fourth one is among a few actors that is recognizing, there is such a challenge and we should deal with it. But they are not, they tend to be fragmented efforts. The duplication with the gaps, of projects and technologies, existing. So this is basically happening on this. If we see the facilitator, as role is actually trying to defragmentize, integrate, and among all the actors. So they are. So all these actors is mostly SMEs, and obviously they have these challenges. But these actors also include, employers, policymakers, people, and training providers, and all these. So this is a skill management as challenges we are facing. So what should we really propose to alleviate or to embrace the changes that is coming from digital transformation? Is actually we can look at these model from the operational aspect of it. So the operational view of this model is we see that all these actors is knowledge-based operations. It's not that they are on site and performing a particular tasks, but actually those tasks involves applying skills, implying assumptions of knowledge they have acquired, before the job, and also the so this is for the actors. And on the facilitating side of it is very much how we should integrate and how disseminate, knowledge about these skills. So we basically propose here as a digital agenda is a digital knowledge agenda. It's a concept of a utility. It's like a water utility or electricity utility, except that the distributed and consumed is knowledge. It is the utility is both enabler and at the same time buffers of technology impact for the actors. Like what we do not have our own power generation or water treatment, but they are encapsulated in the hexagon and service to the circle.
Right,
so
we're going to have to finish up there.
Yeah, okay. So it's basically the next is this utility would be based on AI technologies, is analytics and language technology and knowledge technology. It's a proposal of roadmap, and it has a powerful impact. Basically, we take the knowledge into this utility, we distribute it along these 6 digital processes, and these 6 digital processes would be underlying all these business activities. So it is a kind of a central infrastructure for the skill management. Thank you, Douglas.
Okay, thank you, Gang, and again we'll hear more from Gang in the Q&A session. So please do pose any questions that you wish to be answered by, well, Lisa, Debbie, or Gang, and we will pick them up. I'm going to hand over now to Dr. Margaret Hawthorne. Margaret has written a report reviews, investigates the skills ecosystem in Scottish construction education. Margaret's a freelance consultant with over 20 years experience of working in the public, university and college sectors. Her recent projects have focused on future skills, skills systems, fair work and green jobs, and include the future of UK ports workforce, strategic accessible labour market intelligence with IER and University of Warwick, and a review of the teaching of fair work in Scottish business schools. Margaret, it's a great pleasure to have you with us today, and it's over to you.
Hello, I was unmuted there, sorry. Hello everyone, I'm delighted to be here today. Thank you for coming along. I can't seem to see my own screen. Is my PowerPoint? Yeah. Okay.
Margaret, we can see your PowerPoint there.
Okay,
yeah.
excellent. Okay, so delighted to be here. Thanks for coming along. Douglas and Lisa asked me to prepare an objective overview of the Scottish skills system with a specific focus on skills within the construction industry. And it was a particularly interesting time to do this piece of work because, as you probably know, our skills system is undergoing quite radical change. And of course, the construction industry has recently published its skills strategy and action plan. Our skills system's been under review for about the last 3-4 years because although Scotland does have a strong record on education, there has been a stubborn question mark around whether we have a strong skills system. Recent local and international research and thinking, not least of all from the World Economic Forum, OECD, and more locally the Scottish Government, Skills Development Scotland, the Funding Council, things like the Cumberford and Little report, plus lots of others that I mention in my paper, all point to persistent mismatches between skills supply and skills demand in the current system. This model, which I believe is still being piloted, emerges from the work of Scotland's key skill agencies through the Enterprise and Skills Strategic Board. And it's trying to address that perceived mismatch. This new skills alignment model heralds a shift away from a supply-led skills system to a demand-led skills system, that is, away from a skills system driven by education towards a skills system driven by employer needs. There's been concern for quite some time that qualifications are viewed as a proxy for skills, and yet qualifications don't always seem to deliver the capabilities and the competencies which employers need. Already we can see endorsements for this new type of approach in, for example, CSAP, our Climate Emergency Skills Action Plan, which calls for a realignment of investments in education and training to support more work-based learning and the development of green jobs. For the construction industry, this new model will provide opportunities to become more involved in designing and commissioning and delivering skills interventions. But the industry must be able to identify their future and current skills needs, gaps and shortages. So to better understand the issues around skills needs, gaps and shortages, I looked at the construction sector through a skills ecosystem lens, which is a useful and a very practical tool. This particular framework I've used was developed by Pauline Anderson at Strathclyde and Chris Warhurst at Warwick. And it details the key elements of a high-functioning skills system, which includes the various actors and the institutions who make things happen through different agendas and networks and resources. And this includes, for example, trades bodies and training providers, policy makers, and importantly, as Gang said, HR managers. You can see that the arrows are double-headed because each part of the model is interconnected. So what happens in any one part of the ecosystem has an impact on the other parts. Now, I do look at issues of skills supply, demand, development and deployment in some detail in the paper. But to give you a flavour of that work, let's look at skills utilisation, for example. Skills utilisation is a major concern across industry because we know that the OECD recently reported that 225,000 Scottish employees are currently underutilising their skills at work. Now, this may be for a number of reasons. I see skills utilisation as part of deployment, how skills are used in work. And what happens here should affect planning around how and where skills are developed, perhaps through upskilling and reskilling, which in turn is related to demand, because employers need to think about which skills matter to get a job and which qualifications provide the best evidence of these, but also what skills are actually required to do the job. Is it possible that sometimes job descriptions or job adverts, or perhaps how a job has been designed, are looking for the wrong skills via qualifications, or asking for skills which are never actually deployed in work? And this, of course, impacts on issues of skill supply, because qualifications and credentials should incorporate the mix of skills needed to both get the job and do the job, with the competence and the capability employers need. So I hope this gives you a flavour of some of the cyclical nature of the model and how what happens in one part of the ecosystem has impact and consequences for other parts. One of the things that I try to draw attention to in this report is that although there is universal agreement about the need to upskill and reskill the current workforce, there isn't very much information about where this might happen or who is involved. So my table here tries to untangle that issue a little bit by using a SWOT analysis of skill formation in different contexts, and introduces the central shared resource, which is an idea which you've probably seen mooted elsewhere, sometimes as specialist hubs. Given the current focus on funding for bite-sized training and micro-credentials, evaluating the best locus for skill formation in the construction sector would actually benefit from a more detailed analysis. I also looked in some detail at the construction industry skills strategy and action plan itself through an ecosystem lens to support ongoing discussions about future-proofing, and this is an excerpt from that exercise on the left. The diagram on the right incorporates some of the additional actions which are endorsed by the plan. And again, I just wanted to map out where some of these actions might have an impact. The important roles of the people who drive these actions in local, regional and industry ecosystems was highlighted in the findings from last year's review of the industry leadership groups, and again in the more recent SCDI 2030 blueprint for Scotland. So I've made two main recommendations in my report. One is around using the skill ecosystem framework to explore current and future skills issues in the industry, including further work around competency, which ties in with what Debbie and Gang have been doing. The other is about establishing an industry-agreed language to discuss skill issues, because the current landscape is really quite cluttered, and my own reading around this uncovered the multiple ways we currently discuss these issues via large reports and tables and diagrams, and these can be confusing and can result in talking at cross purposes about, for example, what the industry means by skill demand and skills development. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Margaret. And again, please do pose any questions that you would like to pose to Margaret in the question box. We will, of course, be making the reports available by email after the session, but you can also access them now in the handout section. I'm just going to introduce finally Kirsty Duncan. Kirsty is our Future Skills Coordinator at Construction Scotland Innovation Centre, and Kirsty's going to share a very brief overview of mapping activity that she's been undertaking relating to low carbon, digital and sustainability programmes in Scotland's tertiary and private education sectors. Over to you, Kirsty.
Thanks, Douglas. So I've been exploring mapping cross-industry activities around skills and training to aid sharing of good practice and collaboration and minimise duplication. So I was identifying courses and training at universities, colleges and training providers within Scotland and mapping across the following themes of low carbon, sustainability, decarbonisation and heat energy, offsite and digital. Throughout this mapping, it was clear that there were several courses within tertiary education that offer the chance to explore the key themes. However, when looking within training providers, there seemed to be less available or wasn't clearly stated. Courses within digital skills proved to be the most accessible across all providers. To support this, a survey was put to industry to explore further the gaps of areas of high training and skills available. From the mapping, it showed that there are courses which have undertaken the core themes stated, but there is a lack of courses specifically within the themes with regards to construction industry. Furthermore, there was not one central place where you could look to access a course within the themes. The survey supports this by highlighting it would be beneficial to have further clarity around what is offered from the different providers, however stated that there are pathways there, they just need to be highlighted stronger. We hope to disseminate the resources to industry to allow for others to further explore the training and courses that are provided within Scotland. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kirsty. And again, we will make the products of Kirsty's activity available after the webinar today. So I'd like to join or invite the rest of the panelists to join us. We're going to go into the Q&A. So hopefully they'll start appearing on your screen momentarily. We do have a question that has come in from Peter, and I think this one's aimed at you, Debbie. So the question is, what do we need to do from where we are now to make competency a digital currency?
That's a very good question, and I'll try and answer it briefly. I think there's three key things we need to understand, that there's three pillars to competency. There's data, there's language, and there's knowledge. And those need to all be digitized, yes. I think we also need to have, we need to do some standards work in this. We need to have things like a standard for an individual competency profile and what should be in it. We need to help organizations better understand organizational competency management and adopt competency management systems where it's much clearer what knowledge and data they need in relation to their specific activities. We need to make it more dynamic, more granular, much more context aware, much more independent. But underneath that, we don't need everyone in the sector to make sense or make all the various competence frameworks and all the other frameworks we're getting thrown at us post Hackett to all make those machine readable individually. We need to have these in the commons so that people can customize them, personalize them to their particular applications and needs, and we can encourage innovation in this area. So I think there's a big innovation agenda as well in all of this. I mean, there's lots more, but and I'd be perfectly happy to have a further conversation with Peter on that, but that's the sort of headlines.
Thank you, Debbie. We have a second question that's came in from Peter. Whether or not it's the same Peter, I don't know. This one's for Margaret. So Margaret, your skills alignment cycle looks like any type of commissioning cycle has been used in the health sector for over a decade, for example. So do we review skills commissioning against other examples of sector service planning and commissioning? I think you may be on mute there, Margaret.
Hi, Peter. Yeah, I'm not aware of the system that was an NHS system you mentioned there, Douglas. I think the skill ecosystem I'm talking about is broader than that. I don't think it's just about commissioning for skills. I think it's actually about how industry itself deals with issues of upskilling and reskilling through, for example, looking at the relationship between deployment and development. So yeah, but yeah, so I'm not sure that a comparison of like for like would be effective.
Okay, thank you, Margaret. Hopefully that addresses your question, Peter. I'm sure it raises a number of additional questions. Lisa, I'd like to come to you with the next question. We have reference here to a leaky pipeline between or through the tertiary education system into industry. Which means that many vocational learners aren't progressing into the industry. What can we do to resolve this?
I think there's a number of issues highlighted in the report that we can use, but for me, the kind of key to this is to formalise recruitment. It's about how do we start to recruit people in, how do we tie up academic students who are graduating, college students graduating, apprentices with formal recruitment and HR processes, using things like apprenticeship.scot and really building those relationships between further education and industry. So that we can secure long-term investment in the industry from graduates and learners, as well as to graduates and learners from industry and education.
Okay, thanks, Lisa. We got another question that's came in from or for Debbie. So Debbie, why has the built environment sector got such a blind spot about digitalisation of human activities?
Yeah, I think if we had the answer to all of that, we might have got more change. But I think it started with the whole BIM agenda, and BIM got very focused on technology and process, and the people element was left out of it. And even recently, with all of the good work of CDBB on flourishing systems and the vision, for the built environment, which is powerful and is a much more of a systems view, it's not explicitly within it. The skills or competency ecosystem system isn't understood or made clear. So I think at the policy level, it's not on the table, yes. And I think we've also got an industry where most people are, how many organizations are SMEs and employ less than 5 people. So we don't have the data, the data about people and their competencies is scattered and distributed, if it exists at all, yes. And we have a procurement and program environment that is very much being driven by tactical workforce planning, yes. There's no strategic workforce planning, yes. So it's not even, I don't even see it talked about in the sector. I don't see any training going on in that, yes. So and despite all the good work post-Hackett around competence and all the rest, no one wants to engage in the agenda about why we need to digitalize this, yes, to make it work. I don't think they've defined what the system is yet, never mind how it's going to function, even though Judith Hackett asked for that by the end of last year.
Okay, thank you, David. I think there's a call to action somewhere in there. So if you are in our audience today or watching after the session, I'm sure both Debbie and Gang would be keen to hear from any of you who are doing interesting work in this space. And Gang, I'd like to come on to you with the next question, and it really relates to your concept of competency utility. So what is it that we need to do to refine this concept, and how do we start to turn it into reality?
I have unmuted myself. Yeah, this is basically a vision. That is to say, we must. I would like to go back to Peter's question. What do we digitalize? We digitalize data. We digitalize knowledge. Data. What is data? We actually profile people, profile learning courses, we profile tasks, we profile projects, we profile teams, right? So on the other hand, it's basically we need to have digitalized knowledge. What is knowledge? Apprenticeship standards, NOS, competency frameworks, rules, guidelines, even like those guidelines of how to install the fire doors on the construction site and all these. So basically, that means that involves a lot of many stakeholders here, right? So the next move is actually, I would like to suggest that we can do is to how we can digitalize this and bring it into effect on with this competency utility is actually what we is actually finding the representatives of the people, the industrial bodies, who are also the representative of our employers, or and then figure out the functionality, the stakeholder functionalities. All these circles. Remember those circles, functionality. While at the same time, on the hexagon, the central part of it is we figure out technology vision. So basically, we should, our next step, we should assemble some kind of a community, basically, and contribute. What are the functionalities do this utility actually need to support? And what are the technology visions based on AI capabilities?
Thank you, Gang, and a nice point to wrap up with a huge thank you to our audience for joining and for the questions that you've posed to our panelists, and of course thank you panelists and contributors for sharing their thoughts and for their contribution to the discussion. The reports, as I've mentioned a few times already, they are available in the handout section of your control panel. If you haven't downloaded them, please do so now. As we close the webinar, they will disappear, but you will receive those reports by email. And we do, of course, welcome feedback or any comments that you wish to share, either at info@cs-ic.org, or you can contact the report authors directly. We posted a few details for relevant links. And as always, your feedback is really important to us, so please do take a couple of moments to complete our feedback form after this session. But thank you once again. I hope you found this to be an informative and insightful contribution to the discussion. Very much hope that these reports inspire action as we progress with the recovery plan, and have a great day. Thanks all for joining us.
Thanks very much, Douglas, for inviting us. Yeah, thanks very much.